Uh, Oops, leave the camera on. Hindu, Hindu. There we go, a bit cleaner. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is my first look at the map of the new Smite layout for Season 2. Few points I want to make about this first of all before I actually go into any sort of detail. This whole map that you can see on your screen right now, this is before any of the itemization has come into the game. This is before the god changes have been announced as well. So we're waiting for those to come through when I actually do this. It's just that we've got some downtime on the server, so I thought I'd just quickly throw this together and we can discuss the map as a whole, just on its own benefits and merits of the whole thing. Now, when we first see it, first of all, it's very, very pretty. Two things that are going to be great for new players starting is the beach side and the lava side. The reason I'm going to say beach side and lava side because Long Lane is now beach side, as you can see, Long Lane, beach side, and lava side is solo lane. So at the start of the game when you spawn in, and we're going to be down in this sort of angle, hopefully, it's like you're going to spawn here and they're like, oh, go to the beach, and you're like, well, that doesn't look like beach. But this side, it looks all sunny and bright. Maybe I'll go over here to the beach side. So, for new players coming into the game, instead of saying long lane or short lane or solo or duo, as we normally call them, you can actually turn around and call them beach side and lava side. This is a small example. And obviously the map in the middle is fine. Nothing really has changed too much on the map. Some of the camp sizes do look a little bit bigger. Some of the areas look a lot wider as well. Like this camp size here, the back harpies, very, very large area of interest. I'm just going to actually run the clock forward in this game just so I can actually show you the camps when they've spawned as well. There's a few things to talk about the back harpies as well because of that. But as you can see, the leash ranges are actually most of the time they're still normal to an extent. But there's still one or two things that are slightly different. As you look over the map, you can see that the main things of interest, the Gold Fury pit, has been designed to be almost equal on both sides to an extent in terms of invasion potential for both sides, as well as there's a lot more open in fight area. One of the changes that has been announced as well is the fact that leashing a buff, you cannot hit a buff from outside the range and deal damage to it. That's what's stated in the patch at the moment on this map. By the moment it might not be in full working effect. However, what you will see is that if you try and stand here where my mouse is now and attack into the Gold Fury pit, you won't deal damage to the Gold Fury. That means players have to stand inside the semicircle to actually deal damage to the harpy. And speaking of the harpy, look how amazing that is running around. I'm just letting it play out a little bit because I'm waiting for the camps to spawn as we watch Penguin and ZZ XY deal damage randomly. This is PTS. But yeah, you've got to stay in the range of the camp, which means you can't just tag something and leave. You're not going to get experience for that. But it also means you're not going to do damage. So if you think about this pit here, the circular pit, positioning in this pit is going to be very, very important for a lot of characters when it comes to doing these camps. What I mean by this is that maybe when you're in a team fight scenario, you'll pull the buff to this sort of area here. I'm just going to pause right now as these camps have all just been pulled. As you are in the Gold Fury pit and you're actually fighting, you don't want to group up because gods like Agni, who's in this game for example, will do a lot of damage to you in a clumped up area, which means that you have to have be split apart to an extent so you don't all take the full poke, as well as still tank the Gold Fury, as well as still stay in the pit to make sure you're dealing damage to it at the same time. So when you look at how it is right now, I'm just going to turn on free cam again. What you'll probably find is that it'll get pulled to this sort of area here for the most part, and then people will stand. I mean, if you're playing on order side, that is, you'll probably pull it over to this side away from the team trying to invade onto you. You'd probably have a person standing in the pit here attacking from this sort of angle onto the buff, probably someone with some form of escape or leap that can jump over the wall. Say Anher in this example is Anher's in this game. Let's just go with Anher, yeah? Anher's here hitting it from this side. If he gets in trouble, he can jump over the wall away. He's also got the zoning potential from the rest of the team. The ones that are going to zone out most of the damage are going to be in this sort of position here. So you really going to have to think about your situational decision making when it comes to just doing a Gold Fury in a team fight scenario, especially in competitive play as well, because like one Agni, one Vulcan ultimate, like Vulcan ultimate will just clear that whole area out. You're really going to have to be careful and make sure you have full control of the Gold Fury or the Fire Giant to actually do these buffs down. If we look over the Fire Giant, is the next point. You can see this one is really opened up as well. We'll try and keep it in a sort of order position to see. And as you can see, it's kind of identical now on both sides because the current map isn't. There's 3 entrances into the fire giant area for order. One through here, where my mouse is now, one through here, and one through here, slightly on the back side. Same for this side for chaos. They've got one through slightly through the back side again, one through here, and one through here. And there's going to be almost equal, although it's slightly weighted in one team's favour. But we'll come back to that later when I talk about the map layout as a whole, because that's the only thing I've seen in the map that I'm a little bit concerned about, but we'll see. Talking back to the back harpies anyway. On the back harpies, you can see the spawn point has changed ever so slightly on these. The camp radius has definitely increased as well. This camp range is huge compared to what it used to be on the other map. However, the harpies now spawn slightly different. It used to always be the big harpy in the middle. Now it's one off to the side. It's on the right hand side on this camp, and it's on the left hand side on this camp. So it looks, is it on the left hand side? Yeah, it's on the left hand side. I was getting a bit confused. The back ones there I can't show you. The back ones here I can show you, which also have it spawn on the left. So it's always going to spawn on the left or the right hand side. Is that left to the left? I'm just trying to work out if there's any sort of symmetry because I've not really looked at the back harpies fully. They just spawn ever so slightly different. The map layout as a whole, you can see that it seems a bit wider. Everything seems a bit wider. The lanes seem a little bit wider, a bit spread apart a bit more. Same for the jungle for the most part. It seems a bit more open. So it means that you're going to have to be better with your abilities. There's less choke points on the map, and choke points will come to once again. But choke points are going to be a thing in this game. And when you look at the map, it's finding those choke points, which is the first thing that a lot of players will be doing to find the best choke points. Now, what do I mean by choke points? Is the big question at hand. Big thing about choke points is it's a point where you have to run through where abilities will be able to take up the whole area of the run through. Look at this area here. This is not that wide between the two. We're going in close just to give you the sort of feel of what it would be like at eye level of running through this gap here. This is a choke point on the map. This little area here is a choke point. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I keep saying what do I mean? I need to stop that. If a Kraken went off in that area, can you survive, yes or no? Is there a way for you to dodge that? If a Serpent of the Nine Winds, Kukulkan's ultimate for those who don't know its new name, if it came down in that area, could you actually dodge it or escape? Well, no. No, you couldn't. That's a choke point on there. If we look at the other side of the map as an example of this angle here, is this really a choke point? Is this really a choke point? Maybe this little bit here to the backside is a choke point, but once you get through that tiny little bit of back, when you get to this sort of area, is this really a bigger choke point as the others? Not as much. There's still wiggle room. Wiggle room is very important when you talk about choke points and you talk about situations on the map. So how does the choke point influence the game? Well, these are areas that you're looking to control or catch people in because they almost confirm kills every single time. You channel people into the choke points to force a fight. It's the same sort of thing as if you were in the army, let's say, for example, in a game of FPS like Call of Duty or Halo. You channel people through choke points and you set up positions to fire upon those choke points, channel the enemy through, means it can only come in certain ways. It makes it more effective for you to do so. So, when we look at these choke points, why am I a little bit concerned? Well, let's look at the fire giant, because this is my issue right now. Let's go down at an eye level from the chaos side. Now, chaos side, this is a choke. This is one of the entrances to the fire giant. Nice and wide. Notice this? Notice how wide this little gap is here. This is all walkable terrain as well. This is a big, wide area of influence. A Kraken could potentially cover the whole thing. Very, very difficult to get the Kraken off perfectly, though, to hit everyone, and you're not going to get hit by the knock-up. Will the Spirit of the Nine Winds from Kukulkan manage to hit everybody who walks through this? No. You have wiggle room. That's point one. Point two is going to be this one here. Slightly narrower. The Kukulkan ultimate will hit everybody in this one. So that's one choke point that is a little bit thinner than the other side. So that's a choke point on this side for the chaos. And then this one, once again, quite wide to an extent. When you can see the choke point there. A little bit further apart, yeah, Kraken would still cause an issue. But the choke point's not as important. However, what I notice, I feel, or maybe I'm going to be totally wrong now, is the choke points on this side of the map seem a little bit tighter. This one, pretty similar to the one on this side. If we go in again. This one actually looks a little bit wider when I look at it now. So from this angle, it's quite wide. This angle on this one, it's a little bit slimmer. on the two, between those two chokes. Ever so slightly, it is slimmer on this choke point. So that's one choke advantage to an extent. It's 1-1 because they've got that one over there. But then we look at the other two of these. Well, this is really thin too. Like this choke point. Look how narrow this choke point gets between these two here. That's a really, really narrow choke point. And if it being so narrow, there's more abilities. It's more abilities that are going to be more effective in that. You don't necessarily have to have a Kukulkan or a Spirit of the Nine Winds from Kukulkan. A Kraken or Kukulkan's ultimate. You don't have to have those to make these effective. You could also have other abilities that just deal area damage. A Giannis with a 2, for example, who's on the map right now. Anyone with any sort of like mediocre mage ability is going to fill that area up completely, create a huge choke point. And then we look at the very last one. This is the one that's not so bad, but it's still pretty small. It is still pretty small between the two, between the three. So what does this tell me? Well, this tells me that Chaos seem to have a small advantage at the Fire Giant. Not by much, but I feel that Chaos does have a small advantage in these choke points. Why does it have a small advantage? And that's generally down to one thing, which is these two camps here. These two camps I feel is the issue, because the map's obviously symmetrical diagonally and not straight down the middle, vice versa. So the map differences between these two mean that the points are slightly different. They should probably make it a little bit more similar with these two camps in terms of how much range they take up on the map. This semicircle here, this one's more of a blob than a semicircle there. The semicircle seems a little less harsh, so to speak. This one's a little bit more harsh, and with this wall here it just feels a little bit more turned in, so it's causing a few issues. And I think that's one of the issues is going to be, it's a 2-to-1 advantage in favour of Chaos for choke points around the Fire Giant. Now, it's not to say there's not other choke points on the map, because we discussed one over on this side, which is also Chaos Favour. We call it Chaos Favour because this is Order side who have to be on this side of the map and can get choked through. However, there's still ones here. This one still exists, and this one's a harsh one too for the Chaos side. Other than that, there's the same Chaos one, the same one there for the Order side, so those two are still choke points as well. Other than that, the map is pretty balanced, other than those choke points that I'm talking about. And so you'll have to see as time goes on if the players, the pro players, will be the ones that will say one side has a natural advantage. They do already about the current map. Will they think these choke points are going to give another team the advantage? Because at the moment, everything else is pretty much similar, other than those little choke changes. Other things to mention, the only thing to mention about the map so far, speed buff is now flat speed. It's flat speed, it doesn't give you any attack speed whatsoever. It's been halved with its usefulness to an extent. It just gives you speed movement. It also spawns now on the same side of the map for both teams. On the other side, the red buff is now going to spawn for both teams. The last thing to talk about is where that attack speed's gone, and that is now replaced the blue buff in the duo lane, the longer lane of the two. So this duo lane now is going to have an attack speed buff. I don't know what that's going to mean, because at the moment, like I said, itemization has not been talked about yet, it's not been released, neither has the god changes either. Those could all factor into how these lanes could play out. My initial opinion on the map right now and how I would actually look at doing it, this is from my personal standpoint, and what we could see if the items and the god changes don't even happen. What we could end up seeing is that junglers and the duo lane, sorry, the solo lane and the duo lane switch sides. I expect them to switch sides. What that would mean is the fact that the jungler and the solo laner would actually go into the long lane at the start of the game and start the left hand side of the map if you're Order side. And at the same time you'll see the same thing coming out from the duo, which has now gone into the solo lane, with the support and the hunter coming to do mid harpies, doing blue and coming into the solo lane. Why? Because hunters want the blue buff. They want to be able to push. They want to be able to sustain and keep the pressure on and continue to farm up. What does that mean for the other side as well? Well, let's think about the jungle and the solo laner. The solo laner is going to have an effective time of clearing with the red buff because it's going to give them more damage. They can most of the time deal without the blue buff anyway. We're kind of used to seeing that. At the same time as the jungler will be able to start with the attack speed buff as his initial buff. That will help him clear quicker. It will help him clear quicker than the speed buff technically, because he's hitting creeps to clear them all out. He has to stay in range for the experience as well. So mobility not as a big important factor until you're ganking. I feel the speed will be used more effectively when ganking than starting on the side of the map where it's not going to be effective and getting the attack speed instead. So having the attack speed early on could be beneficial. Likewise, you could look at it from this point of view as well. Say you had a physical solo laner, which will be going duo, and the jungler is magical, say Freya. Freya could take the red buff, because obviously damage on a mage is always good, and the physical solo lane could take the attack speed buff and be able to clear the wave out pretty effectively as well. So those two things into account, they're the situations that I can see develop. What it would mean around the Gold Fury though is people might be like, well, you can't have the support on the solo side because the Gold Fury threat. Well, the support would only stay in that solo lane until the first mid harpy spawn anyway, which is at 3 minutes 20. And if you can hold a team off till 3 minutes 20 at the Gold Fury, then you're golden, because your support will then rotate from mid harpies and then go back to what we traditionally would normally see from a support of roaming between duo lane, the longer lane, sorry, the long lane and the mid lane and the harpies as well in the jungle. So he'd transition back into the same sort of support role we'd see. How would this work against teams that chose not to do this and played standard? It'd actually be really effective, because your 2v1 lane of support and AD carry with blue buff will be able to cause a lot of issues for that one person in the solo lane. Push them to tower, invade the jungle as often as they want, look for the rotations. Likewise on the left hand side though, the solo lane is going to get the help from the jungler early on, and we know that a jungler and a solo laner together will be stronger than a support and AD carry in the early stages, which means he'll be able to get himself to about level 3, level 4, and by that point most solo laners can sustain themselves anyway with wave clear effectively. There is a lot of talk about zoning and things, which I will go through in detail at a later stage once we know how the map's going to play out, because there's a lot of talk about zoning, there's a lot of talk about farming under towers and still getting experience and gold. That's all cool stuff. I agree with all that cool stuff. The only difference is that we can't really talk about it and see which one's going to play out the better until we know the items and the god balances. But this was just a quick look over the map anyway, my personal opinions on it for the time being. This is not my final opinion on it. Maybe I've got things wrong, maybe I'm incorrect. This was just my first glances at ideas that could come about. But we'll see as time goes on. The patch is due out in the next couple of weeks in the PTS, and then we'll go over some more changes as well. Hope they found some sort of information from that, at least talking points. Don't hesitate to just contact me and discuss with me if you don't agree or you do agree, because we can go over it in the future.